Hey guys, in this video we're going to be going over how this silent auction app works. So it's made with React Native and I'm using a lot of different libraries. So I kind of want to just take this time to show you how it's architected, walk you through how all these different libraries are talking with each other so it makes a little bit more sense how the inner workings of this thing works. And this is actually a video suggested by someone in the comments. And if you're also interested in seeing me make a video, I recommend in the description below I'll put a link to my Trello where basically I have all the videos and suggestions for projects that I'm going to be doing, and you can add them, vote on them, and see what I'm going to be doing next. So if there's something you'd like to see, you can put it there. So I have the code up right here. And before we actually jump into the code and I talk about how this works, and side note too, I increased my font size, so let me know if this is too big. Feels slightly big for me, but it might be just right for you guys. So let me know if this is a better font size or if I can go even bigger, or if this is too big. But before I jump into the code and start talking about this, I want to just make sure you guys understand just the basics. So right now we have a server set up. The server, and I'm mostly going to be talking about the sign up page because that works for most of the pages. So what we'd like to do in the sign up page is to create a user. And to create a user, what we need to do is make a post request to this URL passing in data. Now the data here is going to be a variable data depending on what the user passes in with that form. So for example, I can make a post request to create users. But basically what I want is my app is to make a post request to this URL, passing in the data that that user puts in from the form, and then it grabs this data back and it says, oh, this is a successful request, we're good to go. For example, when I do an empty request, it just puts null. I was hoping it would error out so I could just say, assuming this did error out, which it doesn't, maybe if I do a non-unique password, then it'll error out. There we go. So now we get an error. And for example, when it gets an error, we come back and we show an error. So we need some way in our app to make a post request, be able to handle whatever is given back to us, and then update the view and the app. So that's the goal. That's what we want to do. That's why we use some of the libraries that I'm about to talk about. So this is the structure of the app. So this is the whole app. It's wrapped in a provider tag, which basically allows you to look at the Redux store, which basically is just a bunch of data of how your UI that you use for your UI. And lets you update the store in your different components. So I just want to talk about real quick also how our store is set up. So if I come over here to the store, I'm passing it into the provider so that the store that we're creating can be used by all our routes. So if I come into store, you'll notice that we're adding Saga middleware. What is Saga middleware? Saga middleware is used for redux-saga. And what this is doing is, how do I trigger a post request? So one way to do post requests, and if we come over here, the way you do post requests is of course just like this. We're using Feather's client, which makes a post request in the background. And basically we're using redux-saga to be able to make a post request like we are right here. So this is async code for making the post request. For example, we don't have to use redux-saga. We can just put it in our view. But that's kind of bad form. And what this allows us to do is separate everything. And now we have redux-saga, which runs in the background. It creates a background thread that runs this. And we can get the return value. So we're calling sign up. We get the return value, and then we can call stop submit is actually an action for Redux. So we can then update the state from here very easily. So that's the reason why we're using redux-saga. But the reason why redux-saga is actually triggered when actions are fired. So if you're familiar with Redux, you fire actions to update the UI, but you can also launch actions to trigger redux-saga, and that's how it's working here. So whenever we do request signup action, we dispatch that. It comes to this saga and it runs this code, and it makes the post request, and then takes the response and updates our Redux store, which then updates the UI. So to be able to listen for actions, what we need to do is we need to add it in our store here as middleware, and we just do apply middleware on this saga middleware, and that allows us, we're now listening. For every time an action is made, we're listening and checking if that action matches request signup to make a signup, or it would go to something else. So that's what this fork, this fancy looking thing right here, all this is doing is it's forking off to start listening for these. Okay, so we're creating a store right here that's going to be used to store data, and we're also listening for events for Saga middleware, with Saga middleware, which allows us to make push requests. So back to this guy. So we set up our store, we connected it with redux-saga. And what is this routes? This routes is a component which we created that's in the routes folder. So if I come to the routes folder, I can go to the index, and that is what's being imported. And we're actually using React Native Router Flux. This is one of the libraries we're using for routing. And basically what routing is in an app is basically allows you to switch screens. So for example, I want to have a sign up and login screen. How do I switch between the two? That's what this is handling. So basically I make a scene for each one of the pages that I want, and then I say what component I would like to render when I have this page, and then I can use this library to switch pages. This library is pretty simple, and I'm not going to get too much into it because that's basically all there is to it. You create a scene for each one, and then whenever you want to switch, you just say which scene you want to go to, and it transitions. It's pretty basic. So past that, we'll just get into what's happening with the component. So you'll notice with the component, I have all this junk. What is this connect doing? Because we're doing stuff here that looks like a regular component. We have this here that's a little bit fancy. Not fancy, but weird, I suppose, because it's not just looking, it's not a regular component. So we actually import this component when we're using it in other functions, and it's this connect thing. And what connect is doing is I would like to call the action request signup from my view. So when the user, coming back to the app, clicks this, what I would like to do, you saw that we created a saga, which then makes a post request, right? So we only want to, call that saga when the user clicks this button. So basically, when the user clicks this button, we'd like to dispatch the action, which launches out and triggers the saga. So that the action that does that is called request signup. Now, coming over here, modules, user actions. Redux actions is basically something that just makes making actions easier. So when I do request signup, this is equivalent. Basically, this is just making a function here. That's a list. So when I call create or request signup, so I'm going to call it like this, request signup, and then I can pass data to it. Usually I'll pass it as an object, so I can say username, hi, and then the other stuff, right? And what this is going to do is it's actually just going to return an object with the type request signup and then payload whatever this param is. That's what this is returning, and param is what this thing is. That's all create action does. It's just boilerplate, reduces boilerplate. It's equivalent to basically making a function that looks like this. This is basically the equivalent of these two. So it takes whatever you pass into the request signup function, tacks on a type of request signup, and then passes that in the action. But basically, all it's returning is an object, right? So, coming back over here, we would like to call that action. Oops. I want to come back. Don't need this. The sign up index page. Okay, so I would like to call this function. But when I call this function, all it's returning is an object, right? What I really want to happen is I want to get the object and then dispatch it so Redux can then handle this action. So that's what bind action creators does here. Notice I'm calling this map dispatch the props. That's basically allowing us to access this function inside our view. So our view has access to this function because we're using the connect. And the connect implements this or adds this function. We're using this function here, and we're using bind action creators, which says whenever I call this function inside a view, it'll automatically dispatch it for me, which is really nice. And that's why I like using this. So I just call in my view and it automatically dispatched and goes and does its thing. So looking at the view here, it's connected. So when I submit and I call request signup, it takes this parameter here and adds it, calls that function I was talking about, returns an object, and then dispatches it to Redux. Redux then looks at it, and then it's passed to redux-saga, and redux-saga then makes the post request and does stuff and updates the UI. So that's how that's working. And really the last piece that I want to talk about is Redux form. Now this guy can be a little confusing for if it's your first time working with it. So what this does is it makes basically forms a lot easier to create and more robust as well. So what it does is when you type in a value, it actually stores what the user is typing in the Redux store. So when I'm typing here, and I type my email, my password and stuff, all these values are actually in the Redux store. And we can access those and we can do different stuff with that. And it's just a nice way to handle it. Now to set up Redux form, what we needed to do is how does it know, when I type these things, we're not actually dispatching actions ourselves. How is this getting put into the Redux store? Because if we look at our code here, you'll notice what I'm making is, if we can find it, a field. Oh, wrong page. I'm just going to remove, close that page. We're calling this field thing, which is imported from Redux form. When we call this field, or use this field component, we're passing in the component we'd like to basically render for this field, and we pass it a name. Name is required, and name actually doesn't, change anything that's going on here. Name is actually basically what it's called in the Redux store. So field actually knows to talk to the Redux store, but we have to tell it which store to talk to. And the way we do that is in when we're creating the reducers, right here, yep. And we do combine reducers. We have to add a reducer for the form. So the field is going to the field component automatically dispatches actions. And this form reducer, which we get from Redux form, actually listens for the actions and then updates the state, or the Redux state. So it's listening right here. This guy is listening for the actions that are getting dispatched from this field. Now we have multiple fields, and so this name that's how you differentiate them. So the email, username, these are two different things inside the Redux state inside of the form. And now the form is getting differentiated here. That's why you do this thing here. So this is all under the sign up form. That way you can have in our login form, we can also have in our Redux store, for example, a name, because that's the login name, or sorry, the login email, because you don't use name, login email or password. Okay, so right here, that's what that's doing. It's telling it what form, and we can also pass other options that we can use for our form. And it's wrapping our component. If you don't wrap it, you can't actually use these fields. This is what, binds it to this function, or this component. Okay, so the fields, and we actually have to implement stuff. That's why you notice how this code or this component is like super long. It's because that field component actually gives us a lot of things to work with. When it's launching actions, the Redux state changes, and the Redux state is being passed here, some of the things. For example, on change is, I'm pretty sure that's like an action or something. Every time I type, it dispatches an action to the Redux store, updates the value, and then changes what value is set here. So that's how that form is working. And now whenever I click submit, how am I getting all these values, right? Well, Redux form passes a handle submit. So notice how I'm wrapping my signup function. So Redux form actually passes a parameter to this signup component, and it's called handle submit. Now handle submit is passed as a prop to our signup component, and handle submit is what we call when we're submitting. So on submit, when this button is pressed, I call handle submit, and I pass a function in. And the function I'm passing is right here. It's a lambda, and basically I get the fields. This should be fields, because there's multiple. We're getting the email password passed as an object, and we're passing it to this onSubmit function, which actually does the bulk of the things. So onSubmit actually does different things with this submitted data. And as you see at the bottom, that's how we're actually making a request to redux-saga. So that's basically it of how redux-saga, all these libraries are working and how they are communicating. So one last time, I just want to walk you through what's all happening when I'm typing here. So it starts with the username field. I'm typing my username, Bob3. So when I just did Bob3, it updated the Redux store. I was typing stuff in the username field. The username field was dispatching actions to Redux, and that Redux form was storing it in the Redux store and then showing it here, because it's taking the value in the Redux store and showing it here. That's what we're doing over here. That's why this rest of input thing, it's actually one of the things is like value, which is grabbing from the Redux store. Same thing for this field. And same thing for this field. So all those three of those fields were making actions when I was typing. Now, so we have all these values stored in Redux. And so when I hit sign up, what's going to happen is Redux form is going to pass it to my function. And then we're going to call handle submit or on submit. And we're going to request a sign up with the data that was passed to us from Redux form. And then we're going to make a post request with redux-saga running in the background. Create the actual object on the server, get the response. Once we get the response, we're going to actually update stuff in our Saga. So let's go ahead and click sign up. So you notice we transitioned the page. So if we come into our Saga here, we make the request. Here what we're doing. So I should explain this real quick. Yield put, what's that doing? This is dispatch action. I should have explained that. That's what yield put is doing. This looks super weird. All it's doing, so you could think of this kind of equivalent to, it's dispatching an action. So start submit, this is returning an object. That object is being dispatched. This creates an action. So we're submitting basically the sign up form. That's why we're dispatching this. We're making the API call, we're getting the response back, we're printing it out, we're saying the sign up is done, and then we're able to do stuff. We can transition to a different scene using our router. So that is it, guys. That is the whole process of what's going on. And this is basically the same thing happens for view action over here. It's just using different data, different API calls, different actions are going on here. So I hope that kind of eliminate some of the confusion of what's going on. There's a lot of libraries going on. If you have more questions specifically about what different ones are doing, please let me know. I can go more in depth about any particular one. So thank you guys for watching. That's it for this video. If you liked it, subscribe for more, and if you have suggestions on videos you'd like to see, look at the description below. I'll have a link to Trello. You can go on there, you can make a comment, and I will make the video you'd like to see. So see you guys next time.